Hi, and welcome to From Many People's Strength, the podcast that covers Saskatchewan politics and current events. My name is Cory, and my pronouns are he and him.
And my name is David, and my pronouns are they, them, or he, him.
And I guess it's either I missed a lot of news this week, or it's been a slow couple weeks.
Yeah. Like, there was that whole federal election that dominated the news cycle a bit, but there was, you and I created this, right around the time of the provincial and the municipal elections in Saskatchewan. And I think that was much more within the focus of what we talk about.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of Saskatchewan stories within the federal election. There kind of were, and there were some things that were interesting. I think it was pretty amazing, some of the quote-unquote smaller candidates who did as well as they did against the Conservatives. I think, I had a friend who ran for the NDP, and she came in second place in her riding, and was pretty impressive. And I was talking to them, and they were basically saying they had a volunteer and a shoestring budget, and It was kind of running, not running for the sake of running, but the NDP, prides themselves on being a national party and has a candidate in every riding, and knew they weren't going to win, but still did really well considering. And I think there's a number of stories like that we could have done in all the Saskatchewan ridings of people who went in as pretty extreme long shots and, did better than expected nonetheless. But at the end of the day, I think you and I both, if we were wagering folk, would have, 45 days ago said, yeah, it's going to be 11 blue seats, and we would have won our money. That would not have been at good odds. So we would have
yeah, that's right.
Bet $1 and 1.10 cents, right?
That's right.
But anyways, so we do have some stories to talk about. So we should talk about some of the more provincial focused stuff that came up.
Sure. All right. We'll start off with some of the, I guess, new-ish vaccine things. This is about a week ago now, 10 days ago that this was announced. Sask Premier Scott Moe announced mandatory masking and proof of vaccination. I guess I'll try and make that a bit bigger so that it's actually clear on the screen.
Yeah.
So we got, as of the Friday after that, and currently we have a mask mandate throughout the province.
Yeah.
And as of October 1st, people will have to prove that they have had their vaccinations in order to get into basically public places.
Yeah.
And I think we both kind of are in favor of this. Kind of. I wish it never got to this point.
Right.
For me, it seems like it's a kind of a pain in the ass to, because we got to get our shots and we got to register online, and then we got to have this QR code or whatever they're doing now ready every time we go into a business. And if people had just gotten vaccinated earlier and just done things the way they were supposed to, we wouldn't
have reached this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's frustrating. But
Mo has the quote in there of, we've been patient with those who have chosen to remain unvaccinated, but the time for patience is over. I'm like, dude, the time for patience being over was many months ago.
Oh, yeah.
And that's for vaccines. For masks, the time for patience was over a year ago.
Right.
And I think, part of me still wonders if some of the Conservative leadership had made this less of a partisan issue right from the start. Had said, no, Conservatives also support not killing your fellow citizens.
Right.
We wouldn't have reached the point where the government has to actually implement laws and regulations around it, right? And there's only so much Scott Moe can do, and we if we're going to be honest, we need to recognize that Conservatives in Saskatchewan, to a large extent, probably listen to Jason Kenney as much as Scott Moe, if not more so. And some of them listen to Donald Trump way more than either of those two. Yeah. Right. So we know there are a faction within the Conservative movement in Saskatchewan that would have viewed Moe as a traitor had he actually been a bit more blunt about taking public health measures early on, and they wouldn't have followed him.
Yeah.
But also part of me thinks enough would have.
And
again, we didn't make it a partisan issue right from the start.
We are to some degree seeing this pushback against Moe already. Like, even though he waited this long, there are people who are conservatives who are on the right, who are like pissed off at Moe. Yeah. There was a huge conversation.
For sure.
About this. So,
I don't know if they would have been had they had the Conservatives not been like firm right from the start. Because like, how often, and again, I'm trying to choose my words carefully and not impugn, but like the left does this too. The center does this. We all do this. We all have a tendency of sometimes, not always, but sometimes choosing our positions on policy based on the party we cheer for rather than choosing the party we support based on the policies they hold. There are a large number of QAnon folk or Trump supporter folk who are opposed to vaccines because they support Trump, they support Trump because they're opposed to vaccines, right? Like it had all of these conservative leaders come right out at the very start, Moe, Kenney, Trump, what have you, and right off the hop been, no, this is serious. Heck, even make it some wackadoodle partisan thing where you're saying, oh, it's those dirty liberals that are going to give you COVID, so you need to wear a mask to protect yourself from the dirty liberals.
Yeah.
Sure, fine.
But instead, it was the opposite.
It was a spam-demic or plandemic or whatever they called it.
Yeah.
Scam-demic. And so they got people believing that it was a scam early on, so that when they later on went, actually, it's now actually negatively impacting our base. Now we have to change course. Your base already is too deeply entrenched into this belief to follow you back to reality. So it's and there's the most hilarious take I've heard on all of this, and again, we're now tiptoeing a little bit away from Saskatchewan politics, but a politician in the U.S. Who was claiming that it's actually the left is responsible for conservatives being anti-vax and anti-mask. And
how?
Because it's the fact that the left encouraging people to get vaccinated is all a clever ploy to convince conservatives not to, because they know conservatives will just do the opposite of whatever liberals tell them. So they know that conservatives would just own the libs by not getting vaccinated. So the harder we try and promote science, the harder we try and encourage people to get vaccinated or wear masks or take public health and safety measures seriously, the more we should know that the more conservatives are going to push back against doing these things because they're going to want to own the libs so badly.
Even if that was the case, that doesn't make them look better.
No, not at all, right? So again, and
it's not the case by any stretch.
No, that is not why. That's certainly not at least why I encouraged people to get vaccinated. And that would also be a much more plausible theory if we weren't ourselves getting vaccinated. I don't know. It's So
if we're encouraging people to get vaccinated and then not doing it ourselves, then you might have a case that we're trying to, convince you to do this, trick them or whatever. But that's not.
Or maybe it's because we are getting vaccinated that's the trick.
That
we're only getting ourselves vaccinated in order to convince conservatives not to. I don't even know anymore.
You go into the vaccine clinic and you give them a wink and a nod, and they know you're a lefty, so they don't have to give you the fake shot.
So, they give you the real one when you go in. So.
Yeah, that's right. The real mind control drug comes when you don't give them the right code.
Yeah. And it's I would like to see at least a little bit more of, like, again, one of the only times in my existence I will ever say I would like Moe to be a little bit more like Jason Kenney, and actually take ownership for his fuck up.
Oh, yeah.
Because Kenny actually did, and like I said, it's pretty damn rare that I'm ever gonna, say someone should be more like Kenny, but. Kenny actually came out and said, it is clear now that we were wrong, and for that I apologize. Like, that's actually a pretty unqualified apology. Like, that's as far as political apologies go, like, openly saying you're wrong, just flat. Not I apologize for people misconstruing, not I apologize for people not understanding. It was just, no, I fucked up and I apologize. Which, like, good on Kenny for saying it. I think he's also at that point where he has to be that blunt in order to get the base to on side. And I would like to see Moe do the same. And I'm not optimistic, but
like, I think I don't have an article in this set of notes where we're talking about the actual numbers here, but we have a lot of cases coming out every day of new cases of COVID. So, like, at this point, you really gotta say, like, yeah, they fucked up.
Yep.
So
that's what it is. So we'll see where this all leads. I know at my work I've already had people calling in, demanding to know if we were going to require it and angry about stuff, and we'll see where this goes. So,
well, I mean, if it's a government mandated thing that you have to show vaccine proof.
And it's like retail places are exempt, right? So it's retail business, including grocery stores, don't require it. And there's a number of other places that won't in Saskatchewan, but mainly it's restaurants. So restaurants, bars, nightclubs, like any type of location, fitness centers, any type of place where, like, you are likely to have your mask off for periods of time.
Right.
That's where I think in general where it is.
I've been going to the gym despite, there not being masks and stuff. And I've been the only person in the gym wearing my mask. And I sometimes, like, wonder, like, is this location is producing cases of COVID? Like, what's happening are there gym people going home and having to go to the hospital after being at this gym?
Right.
And I don't know, it's disconcerting. So I hope, I hope people start to smarten up.
I don't know. It's so many of these things are tough to, like, where do you make your own risk lines? Like, above and beyond any provincial mandates, but, like, and again, this is that broken record thing. We've been talking about that for a year now on where do you draw the line on what is your risk tolerance? I know mine was incredibly, incredibly low before being vaccinated.
Right.
But I've, since being double vaxxed, waited my 2 weeks after my second vaccination, but starting in early to mid-July, I've been going more places now.
Right.
Seeing more people, and I'm still trying to be, somewhat cautious about going places where I'm likely to only be around vaccinated people, things like that. But at the same time, that, like, at some point you do have to balance risk and reward. But we'll see where things go next, right? Because with the various variants, that's
the thing, right?
Too, so.
I know when my son and I were getting our second shot, because we just got them, there were people in there for their third. Yeah. So there's boosters happening for people who are over a certain age or going out of the country and stuff like that. So, I mean, maybe we'll all get our third one before too long, but
who knows? Yeah, I should check to see when I'm eligible for a third, or if I am, or how that works. Because I'll get a third if I can. Like,
well, like my partner was saying, like, I'll get a shot every 6 months if they need us to. Like, I don't care.
Yeah,
it's not going to bother me. But
yeah. If it means I can travel to Saskatoon and make out with people, yes, I will. Like,
there you go.
You can stick whatever needles in me you need to, if I can still go to Saskatoon and make out with my friends.
There you go.
So
it's a good reason to get the jab regularly.
Yeah. I went a year and a half without doing that, so I do not want to have to go back to that level of isolation again.
For sure. Okay, I don't know how big a deal this is provincially, but this story came out, and I was reading about it. This Greg Fertuck is on trial for the murder of his wife. I was reading it, and it sounds like she's still missing, and he claims he's innocent. They showed his daughter a video of the interrogation, and they got her to come in and just talk to him. It's all very, I don't know. I don't know. It's an interesting case. I feel bad for the family to have to deal with this. I read about this from the perspective of not trusting interrogation techniques, because often the police can get false confessions out of you, and there's lots of cases where people are assumed to be guilty, so then the evidence is arranged in such a way that it makes them look more guilty to a jury or a judge. And I'm not saying that this guy's innocent. I don't want to imply that in any way. I don't know. He insists he's innocent. His daughter seems to think he's guilty, and the RCMP seem to think he's guilty. But that's what a trial is technically for, is supposed to be. But
and I think the fact that even in cases like this, it speaks to how much trust the police have lost over the years.
Right.
By the fact that even these are tough situations, and they are always the type of situations people bring up when there is talk of defunding police or abolishing police or whatnot. These are the situations that get brought up on what to do in these cases. I just go back to, though, the inconsistency of the ethics of police historically within this province and this country. That feeds into why things like this happen. And more so, the only person to blame is the murderer. Whoever, whether it is him or someone else, the blame falls squarely on the shoulders of the person who did the murder. What I would also say is, if we could shift funding to places where we can help people escape violent situations, we know we would have less murder to deal with. That is a statistical reality, that money spent on preventative measures and support for people in violent situations.
Even in the case of in this particular case, the daughter did mention something about, it might have been in a different article, but the daughter mentioned that in the past, her dad had threatened her mother. So this is, it's not unlikely that he was an abusive person, and more resources allocated to helping her get out of that would have helped avoid this situation. It was something that caught my eye when I was reading the news, and I thought, well, we can touch on this a little bit.
Yeah, it also seemed very, bringing in the daughter during the police interrogation seemed very out of
manipulative.
TV. Well, it seemed like a type of thing you would see in a TV show, not in reality. I think they're the voir dire in the middle of it to determine the ethics of some of that spoke to that as well, as to whether that's acceptable or not, and whether that should be acceptable. And one of the things that we see within the criminal justice system is it's always these extreme cases that are used to justify the slow erosion of rights. So, who wants to defend the abusive, murderous husband? Well, no one. So we can set precedent where his rights don't have to be respected. But then that same code of conduct becomes acceptable when it's, an 18-year-old who's accused of having drugs. We can now bring in his family members to start being part of this interrogation. And
Right.
like if you don't confess, we'll convince your mother you did it. Or if you don't confess, we'll show your 3-year-old daughter or whatever, evidence that you've done horrible things. Like where do we?
And that is a tactic that they often use with like younger people, is they'll say, well, we're going to tell your parents that you're a criminal if you don't confess. And it goes through like, even, this undercover police officers were posing as criminals in order to get him to confess under certain circumstances. Right.
Yeah.
Like that's done all over Canada, regularly, and often comes up with like false confessions because people lie in these situations, or they say, something they think will get them, advantage with other criminals or what have you. So there's all these tactics that are used to get the confession from, and I guess to plug another show, the Occulte Veritatis podcast did a great 2-part series on false confessions in policing. And it's I don't know. Again, I can't say if he's innocent or guilty, but false confessions are a real thing, and the police need to apply they need to do something differently so that they can be trusted.
Yep. No, I agree. So I mentioned earlier that the federal election wasn't as Saskatchewan focused, but we do want to talk a little bit about that, I think.
Yes, that's right. We're going to cover a little bit of the federal election. Because in Saskatchewan, of course, we ended up with a status quo.
Status quo, and the new heartland of the Conservative.
That's right. Yeah, we're the only province where every single seat went to the Conservative Party, including Andrew Scheer, which I guess I should have known, but also surprised me.
Really?
Yeah, a little bit. I thought he kind of, with the losing of the leadership and all that, I kind of thought, well, maybe people will realize that he's not worthy of support.
Yeah,
but
no. Anyway. And that was actually the riding I was talking about at the top of the show too, where the opponent did not have a lot of resources,
right?
And I think did incredibly well in the result that they did get against Scheer. Considering how few resources they had to fight the fight. But yeah, I am surprised you are surprised at Scheer winning as handily as he did, to be honest.
Yeah, maybe I had too much hope in my heart. But
yeah, it's 60% voted Conservative. If you add Conservative and PPC together, it was 66.6% of the province's vote.
Yeah.
If you start adding in Maverick Party, it's up near around 70% of the vote voted for nearly 70% of the vote went to a political candidate who opposed banning conversion therapy. Who 70% of this province feels it should be legal to torture me.
Yeah. In order to convince you to not be who you are.
So that's a reality of a province I know I live in, that 7 out of 10 people I'm going to encounter have no moral qualms with me being tortured.
Right.
Not for a crime, not for just for sheer, as long as my parents wanted it. I'm lucky that my parents wouldn't have, right? But if I was a kid, they wanted it to be legal to have my parents have me tortured.
Yeah, and I can already hear people saying, well, that's not why we voted Conservative. That's not something we want from our Conservatives or leaders or whatever. Yeah. But the fact remains that if you are putting economics over something like that, like the right not to be tortured, I'm sorry, you're on the wrong side.
I've been saying this about Trump for 5 years. You may not have voted for Trump because he's racist, but that wasn't a deal breaker for you. And you may not have voted for the Conservative Party because they support the torture of queer Canadians, but that wasn't a deal breaker for you.
Yeah.
So Like what is and is not a deal breaker for you tells me a lot about a person.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty damn important.
Mm-hmm. And not this election, but the election before, I voted Liberal, and I had to sit down and look myself in the mirror and ask some of those similar questions, because there were things that the Liberal Party did in their first term in office. I had to really think long and hard about whether they were deal breakers for me.
Yeah.
And some of them came close. Ultimately, I decided they weren't. This time around, I decided they were. There were other reasons I didn't vote Liberal this time either, and certainly didn't vote Conservative.
Right.
But again, that is like, you have to own how you vote.
Yeah.
And like, maybe someone can say, yeah, no, I don't agree with it, but it's not a deal breaker for me, and can say that with all honesty, because for them it just isn't. I just have to know that when push comes to shove, those are the people in my community.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's the province we live in. Nearly 70% of this province feels that way.
Yeah. In 2019, I was very much on the, okay, so now you have made it so we have no representation in the leadership of the government, because every single person, every single riding went Conservative here, and the Liberals were the minority leaders, right? And it's much the same now. Like, our entire province is represented by people who will be fighting against anything that the leadership does. That means they don't have any actual say in what is done. They can't, like, if you have an NDP rep, you can at least say, okay, well, maybe my rep will negotiate for a better deal for my riding, right? But if you have a Conservative MP, you don't have that. We just have opposition, and we have no say in what's actually happening in the country.
Yeah, it's interesting. And from 2019 to 2021, and as much as we talk about how the Conservatives are now dominant in Saskatchewan compared to Alberta, I guess like they dropped further in Alberta. Conservatives dropped in Saskatchewan more than any other party. The Liberals were virtually flat. They dropped by 1.5%. The NDP went up by 1%. So the Liberals lost about 1%. The NDP gained about 1%.
Right.
Conservatives lost 4%, but the PPC gained 5%. And the Maverick Party got 1.5% as well.
Yeah.
So like it's not only is the Conservative Party still strong, the parties even further right than the Conservatives also got stronger.
Yeah.
I think, and again, this is sort of more on a federal level, and I think this is more me just sort of analyzing the real politic rather than the sort of the policy type politics or whatnot, or whether things are actually good or bad. I think the net result of this election is going to be a big win for the Liberals and a big loss for Trudeau personally. Because for the Liberals, from a real politics standpoint, normally around that 3.5 year point, like leading into the election, at the 4-year mark, opposition parties start talking about how minority parties don't have mandates. And had there not been an election right now, this next year would have been nothing but the NDP and Conservatives saying the Liberals don't actually have a mandate to govern.
Right.
And threatening an election on every bill, et cetera, et cetera. And now they can't. Like that sort of kneecaps them a bit for saying the Liberals don't have a mandate. They don't have a strong mandate, but they obviously do. They were elected again. So
yeah.
And I think the Canadians would frown very heavily upon the Conservatives and the NDP working together to take down the government 6 months from now.
Right.
However, from a Trudeau perspective, he's now delivered 2 minority governments in a row in spite of a variety of different things that should have been in his favor. And if there is rumblings in the party to replace him, they can safely do that right now.
Yeah.
Right now is one of the safest times to replace him, because there won't be an election in 6 months.
It's actually like, it might even be strategically beneficial for them to do so, because I know people who dislike Trudeau enough that they are saying, I don't even mind if the Liberals are in power. I just want to get rid of Trudeau.
Yeah.
So
And part of that smear campaign, like that, part of that is part of it's justified and part of it isn't, and it's hard to disentangle the two from each other. But rightly or wrongly, I definitely think you're right that for much of the country, Trudeau's a liability to the Liberals right now. I still think he's an asset in a lot of other areas. Definitely I would say in Quebec, he's probably still an asset. As in parts of Quebec, I think he's hated in Quebec almost as much as he's hated in the West. He's just also loved in Quebec in a few more places as much as he's hated. So definitely a polarizing figure.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't have much else to say about the federal election. It was, I woke up the day after going, nothing is different for me.
I was on the phone with someone that night. It's like, oh, are you following the election? I'm like, I guess a little, kind of. Like, it's exactly what I knew would happen. Like, why is anyone acting like this is a surprise? And I had a certain sense of relief that the Conservatives didn't form a government, but I couldn't see anything.
I didn't think
really
it was going to happen. Yeah.
No.
I wasn't expecting them to form government, so.
No. But we'll see what happens in 2, 3, or 4 years from now when the next election happens. I think that one might be a little bit more dicey compared to this one.
Yeah, that's right. Slap in the face. Sask Premier's advice to medical workers hits sour note with doctors.
That's an understatement.
Right. So, I guess I don't really know how to start this one.
Yeah.
Because we've got a commentary on a commentary sort of thing. Situation.
Yeah, that's fair.
So it's not entirely like, I don't know. Doctors have a right to be frustrated with anything coming out of Scott Moe's face. So I guess that's where I'm going to start with this.
Yeah. And this in particular, like Scott Moe has been undermining medical professionals in this province since the start of this pandemic.
Yeah, that's right.
And we talked about it a year ago during the election, and trying to play both sides and trying to do the, people should wear masks kind of, sort of, but we trust them to do their own thing and let's not be bullied by doctors. And like, if you're going around a year and a half ago talking about people shouldn't get bullied by doctors into doing things, but they should just use common sense and do stuff on their own. And now to come out, and I guess we should clarify what the thing is about. Now to come out and say, Moe comes out and says, doctors should start giving guidance to Saskatchewan people on what to do when it comes to COVID.
Well, yeah. Yeah, start.
Really, really provide some guidance. We should start doing that. Doctors should probably get on. Like, they've been doing it for a fucking year and a half, and you've been undermining them at every step.
Yeah.
Fuck you would be my response if I was a doctor to that.
I guess the story is basically a series of tweets from Tamara Hins, and in one of her tweets, she said, "Sir, we've been providing guidance all along to the public, but most importantly to you. We have wanted to provide collaboration and share our expertise to let you know our concerns. Today we are in our worst wave yet, but please don't place any blame at our feet. They've been working their asses off. It's not doctors' faults that we're here. It isn't medical staff's fault that we're here. It's politics was the reason that we are here." So...
It's unbelievable. Like I don't even know. Like I think her response was incredibly restrained compared to what I would be doing. It's like someone's been, digging a giant hole in the ground for a year and a half, and the asshole who keeps bringing in freaking bulldozers to dump sand back in the hole now all of a sudden gets out and goes, we really need a hole to be dug here. You should get on that. Like,
you ass.
Yeah. So start listening or start providing guidance as if you haven't been undermining the guidance they've been giving.
That's right. Yeah. Ottawa says they're ready to help the Saskatchewan government battle COVID-19. But again, the article says the province hasn't formally requested any federal aid. But Patty Hadju from Ottawa, the federal health minister, says talk to Paul Merriman and ensured that he knows that the federal government is going to provide or will provide them with aid. So I know our ICUs are filling up, our hospitals are full with people who are extra sick because they haven't been vaccinated, and the new variant the Delta variant is very hard on people, but
yeah, and like this is one of those cases where I was talking to a friend who is also fairly left-leaning and places quite a bit of blame at the federal level for not just forcing the province to accept help.
Right.
And I think there's, probably something to be said there. I think it is hard to predict what the political firestorm would have looked like had the federal government stepped up and declared state of emergency, suspended certain aspects of constitutional powers, and taken over health stuff. Like, the province is supposed to be in charge of health.
Right. It's really hard.
The federal government can provide assistance in that. And there's a lot of a delegation of power shit, but the federal government could have overridden all of that by a declaration of a state of emergency.
Yeah.
But then we wouldn't have Scott Moe today saying, "Oh, we need to do something about this COVID thing." We would still have Scott Moe now fight because Moe has to step up now, and Kenny the same thing. Both of them had to step up and start implementing policies to fight against COVID because no one else was doing it.
Yeah.
If the federal government had implemented a state of emergency, had been forcing federal level programs, then Kenny and Moe could have fought against it tooth and nail and really whipped up Conservatives' anger about, the government overreach, we need to fight this.
Right.
You have premiers, going into press conferences, shouting from the rooftop, people shouldn't wear their masks or get vaxxed. And maybe they wouldn't have. Maybe I'm not giving Moe and Kenny enough credit, but I
don't know. They really do seem to be putting politics ahead of public health. So
yeah, and they're starting to do less of that now that they've kind of realized, oh shit, we actually are responsible for the provinces where premiers are.
Right.
But yeah, it's a tough call. So I think there is some blame to be laid at the feet of the feds for not helping Saskatchewan and Alberta a bit more. At the same time, I also have a little bit of sympathy for any federal government that ever tries to help Saskatchewan because they usually get their hand bit when they try.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. But it is good that they've spoken and they've made it clear that help is available for them. So maybe they'll take them up on it. Maybe they won't. I don't know. But
we shall see.
Yeah, I know we're in pretty rough shape. And Alberta's in pretty rough shape too, but
I don't know. There's no easy answers when you just have massive swaths of the population choosing to not protect themselves and others.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I guess we say it over and over again, but that's really the core of it, right? Like, is that we're supposed to be doing this to try and help protect our neighbors as well as ourselves. And we have an entire segment of our population that just refuses to do that and thinks that and actively calls it oppression that we don't like them not helping to protect ourselves, everybody.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Shrug my shoulders. I wish there were easier answers. Hopefully we can continue to work through this and that if we can get enough people across the political spectrum, rallying the troops, as it were, on whatever side of the aisle they're on, we can get enough people realizing that this isn't a political issue and is an actual public health issue.
Right. All right. Well, with that, thank you everybody for listening and hanging out with us. You can find us at anchor.fm/frommanypeoples. Our Twitter is at skpoliticspod. Our Facebook is facebook.com/frommanypeoplesstrengthpod. And our Gmail, you can email us about all of this stuff. If you have thoughts or think that we said something that was incorrect, frommanypeoples@gmail.com. Or if you like what we're doing, you can give us a couple bucks at buymeacoffee.com/frommanypeoples. Thank you, David, for another chat.
Thank you, Cory, for organizing stuff as usual and keeping me somewhat semi-focused as we go through topics.
Well,
and
we're making good time the last few episodes.
Yeah, we're not flooding people with hour and a half long.
Yeah, that's right.
An hour and a half of me babbling at people anymore. So I appreciate all you do to keep the lights on and the sound recording as we do all of this. It's much appreciated. So I look forward to chatting with you again in a couple weeks.
You bet.
All right, take care.